thing that we committed to that we deliberately did not address as fully in the report as we wanted to, and as we committed to, and as you want us, as you want, to the longer-term projections and what we're calling the tier projections, if additional revenues come about largely because of the sales tax override or other revenue source and something like that. We're prepared to start talking about that a little bit now, but we wanted you to focus mostly on what are the short-term opportunities that you need to look at, regardless of funding revenue, funding availability, as well as where we thought that there were issues about deployment, about use of staff, about efficiency, and we wanted you to really focus on that, and we're sorry to put you through that process, but that was the principal reason why we provided you the report that we did. Because what we're doing now and starting to look forward in it, we're starting to get some of the dream team, some of the additional things that you want to look at if additional revenue is available. Things like a community, augmenting the community response team, increasing patrol staffing so that you've got more than 45% available for field patrol personnel, so that you're increasing traffic enforcement, so that we're increasing the non-sworn field operation staffing along the lines of what you had before the recession, increasing investigative staffing and the like. So for police, we're identifying what is going to end up being like another $3 to $4 million in expenditures if you've got additional revenue streams available. And we're doing the same thing for the jail, for the other justice systems, and for the fire department. So I just wanted to put that out there and allay your concerns that some of the additional services that I'm sure you feel are important are going to be addressed.
Well, I mean, I can tell you in my assessment, $3 to $4 million is a drop in the bucket for what this police department needs. And I'll tell you that based on what you have written in here right now and the way it's written right now, I think that our ability to get that money would be very difficult because you say our patrol staffing is adequate.
It is.
So
it is. You are at the targets that we've worked with, and other consulting firms have worked with other law enforcement agencies in hundreds of communities across the United States.
Well, then why is the national average 1.8 officers per 1,000 residents and I'm at 1?
Because that is a meaningless statistic that even the International Association, the Chief of Police, says is a meaningless statistic.
But you're using a national average for the fire department.
No, that's different. That's a response standard for what happens to a fire if you don't get to it in 4 minutes. That's a completely different analogy.
So here's my problem is you've taken no consideration for the geography and the size of the city. You've taken no consideration of daytime population swell because we're a city in the middle of rural California and everybody comes to Redding. You've taken no consideration of what we talked about with emerging crime trends for prostitution, heroin, and increasing. You say we're adequate. You didn't look at response time. Okay, hold on. I'm telling you what you told me is that we need to get a goal of response time from council and base our staffing off of that. There's nothing that talks about response time in here. Nothing.
I didn't say that. I never said that. We said as a best practice, yes, you should do that. But the staffing analysis is based on a certain service capability as defined by something like proactive ability and by response time, as well as other things. And so that is in there, as well as you asked about the daytime population that comes in. That is considered in there because they generate calls for service. They are consumers of proactive activity. That is in our analysis.
But 4 of your 7 measuring metrics are estimates. How is that statistically feasible?
It's not an estimate. We actually measured your calls for service and your proactive abilities.
But you're estimating our report writing time and 3 other statistics of the 7 that you used to develop proactive time.
Well, those are not huge drivers of the workload. They are good estimates that have been used by our firm and other firms for many years, and in fact, overestimate the amount of time for report writing.
30 minutes per report?
We've been able to measure it.
I can adjust these times by 5-10 minutes and adjust your statistics by 3 to 5%.
We can look at that individual assumption if you can give us some data. I mean, you know how report writing goes. Some of them take, a large majority of them take 5 or 10 or 15 minutes, and a few of them take 2 or 3 hours. But the average of that is less than that, and that's what happens. We both know that.
I can't believe that a city, when I look at other cities like Santa Monica that's 8.5 square miles and has the same population of me that is 213 sworn, and you're telling me that I'm okay at 102. You guys are counting corporals as part of the patrol staffing and their supervisors. They don't go into the patrol totals.
They are neither supervisors nor line staff. They are in between.
No, they're supervisors, and they fill in as line staff when needed. I made that very, very clear. And that's not how they're computed in your numbers. Go ahead, Roger.
You know, the reason that...
Go ahead.
Okay, the reason that we have to use... Hi, I'm Roger Moore, Captain over Field Operations. The reason that we are using corporals so much as a resource on patrol is because we have such few bodies. With our, at any given time, 10% injury rate and some folks in training, there is not enough policemen to fill the beat roles. They're designed to be supervisors. They are supervisors at all times, and we use this as kind of a mentorship program to take a look at them for sergeants. So that is a very crucial piece to what we do in field operations, and when we count them in as a beat officer, it kind of skews everything for what we're doing and our lack of resources.
I know of no other police department in the United States, and I'm sure you could come up with an example otherwise, that duplicates supervision at both the sergeant and the corporal level. Nobody does that. Nobody has the resources to do that. Yeah, corporals are a special situation. In many agencies, they're field training officers, so let's take those off the table. In most other agencies, they fill in for sergeants as necessary. They are mentors because they're senior police officers, but they're not pure supervisors.
Okay.
Well, and in the discussion, this is Greg Mathews, in the discussion and the interviews, it became pretty clear among many interviewees that the corporal position might actually be transitioned out unless it was made a specialized position like an investigator or something like that. And as you pointed out, clearly you're using the corporals as a response unit in the large majority of situations.
Well,
and secondly, if they're pure supervisors, then with a sergeant and a corporal, then your supervisor to staff ratio becomes overburdened. So fundamentally, we developed a model based on how you presently deploy, which is using corporals for the most part as a call for service responder, with the intention potentially of getting rid of that corporal rank.
And what is your supervisor to officer ratio?
Usually 1 to 6. Usually for patrol, it's usually 1 to 6 to 9.
That's way high.
1 to 6?
Most departments use the military standard, which is 1 to 5.
No, they
4
don't.
to 5.
No, they don't, Robert. They don't.
Okay,
Stockton does. Where I came from.
So given...
Okay, fine. Maybe Stockton does. Most don't. I mean, when I say most, I mean hundreds of the departments I work with don't do that. They're struggling to get within 6 to 9. San Antonio was 15 to 1.
Well, that's poor supervision.
Yeah, that is poor supervision. It costs them dearly.
So also, what I noticed here in the using the staffing model, we're going to lose 4 officers in a year and a half because 4 of our officers currently in that 102 sworn staffing is only a 2-year commitment from City Council. And there's no guarantee that we're going to retain those 4 officers at all. In fact, they've said quite the opposite. So that is.
Well, that is the kind of input we need, as well as any advice you can give us on things like our calculation for the attrition rate, which we had fairly low.
Right.
Hey, Greg, it's Bill Schueller. Hey, I was looking at your patrol unit staffing in the technical appendix. You talk about all of this lists what our actual staffing would be if we had, in a perfect world, if every shift was filled, we didn't have anybody on sick leave, we didn't have anybody on vacation, we didn't have our injuries, and none of these account for that. I don't know that any of your staff ever contacted myself or Chris Smirnos or Butch Brown about taking a look at our actual patrol schedules for 2014, which you got your data from, and show exactly how many officers were working, how many were on overtime, and how many we had on injury. And that would really skew these numbers and change the amount of proactive time you would really have.
If we have an issue with the way we portrayed current available staff, and we did include a bit attrition factors, but if we didn't do that right, that's the kind of feedback we need.
Okay, so we've got all that for you, and there's actually some errors in there, and we'll send you all that in email. But and one thing, talking about 16 staff members during an hour period that don't actually exist, I don't know where that came from. And the only other thing I'll add to it is you took 7 months of call for service. I know there's limitations with our CAD system, and you guys took 7 months and basically averaged it out to become a year's worth of data. But the full year's worth of data is completely available. I pulled it this morning from our computer analyst upstairs, and you can have all of that. You guys came up with about 58,000 calls for service, and we had already over 90,000 police reports last year and 113,857 calls for service. Now, and
that includes officer initiated.
Absolutely does, but you can't tell me that there were 70,000 officer initiated activities last year. It just didn't happen. So we did give you credit in the report for having an unusually high level of officer initiated activity, and that was a very positive thing. In fact, Sure.
It was about the highest I'd ever seen.
I guess what I'm trying to say is the data is available to you. You just have to ask for it. And if you need all of our calls for service for last year, we can provide that to you. SHASCOM can't.
We did ask for it, but that's what we were able to get. What happened on that, Ian?
We did receive it, and we filtered through that to come up with that number. To be able to filter it, we were only able to use that 7th month period. But those months that were included in that 7-month period are some of the highest activity months in the year. So there's no way that it could be lower from that.
What I'm trying to say is...
So we use 12 months to count, but 7 months in order to drill down deeper. Is that what you're saying?
No, you guys only received 7 months of data. I have the exact data you were given by our SHASCOM. You were given 7 months because you were trying to do 2014, and they only store a year and a day based on current day. But the full year's data is stored in the Reading Police Department. So all of that data is available to you.
Okay, then let's make arrangements to get it to us.
Great. Okay. I think that'll change a lot of your evaluations of our numbers.
Well, fundamentally, you're suggesting that the 7 months of data annualized doesn't reflect 12 months. You're saying it's far too low. Is ultimately what you're saying here?
Well, I don't know if it's low or it's high, but you can't make an estimation based on barely a year's worth of data and turn it into a full year. It just doesn't work that way. You have to have to get an accurate determination of how much proactive time and how much work officers are doing. You need to look at all the data for the entire year.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. We will.
Okay. That's all I have for right now.
The other numbers with you
On the
Richard, there was a problem that Lieutenant Brindley found with the case number load in investigations. I think they're showing like 8 to 10 cases per detective, and their actual caseload is about 27.
Yeah, let me find the numbers.
So he's looking through his notes right now, but that's something that's going to have to be adjusted. And
well, well, let me be clear about what we did, because I don't think you understand what our process was here. Sure, they've got 25 or 30 open cases, but the purpose of doing the individual interviews with them was not to look at the active cases, the open cases, but the active cases. So what we did is we did a desk audit with each of the detectives that went through each one of their cases and established when it was assigned, what it was for, what they had done on it, importantly, when they did something on it, and what the potential outcomes were of it. And that represented a desk audit. So what happens is that there are a lot of those 25 or so cases that they hadn't done anything on them for 3 or 4 months. You know what happens. You do an investigation, it goes nowhere, so you're waiting for something else to happen. Or you go somewhere and it goes to some completion and you've issued a warrant, but you don't know where the guy is. So that's not active caseload. So all of the caseload standards for us and in the literature relate to active cases, cases which in the past month or two had actually had an interview, had some research done, some other kind of follow-up or something like that. And that gets you down to the 8 or 10, and that was the issue.
Okay, well, in talking to the investigators that you did interview, they told me that they were asked to bring a representative sample of their caseload for the audit. They didn't bring all of them. So looking at some of your numbers, for example, on page 63 of your report, just as an example, for financial crimes and property, we surveyed one. That person had 5 open cases. We went through it, and between the 2 of our investigators assigned to those 2 specialties, there's actually 49 open cases assigned to them for an average of 24.5. So
well,
I think that
so just like with the patrol information, if there's other information that we need to review, we will certainly take in our defense. We would have never said that.
Well, I think to get a true, for you get a true number, it's going to necessitate going through every open case, not a representative sample, because it's just not accurate. Because going through,
I agree. We would have never said that. They misunderstood what our intentions were.
Okay. Because so
we need other information. We'll do that.
Yeah, I mean, and here's one is under elder abuse on page 64. You have one person that was audited, and that there was 3 open cases for an average of 3. The true numbers are 23 open cases.
Well, I guess again at this point we have to establish what's an open versus what's an active case.
Okay. Well, I would say that if we're classifying as open, it would be open. Since that's
are you? Did you? I understand. Greg's just texted me. I'm kind of breaking up. Let me get by a window. I'm at an airport. Okay. Is this any better right now?
That's fine.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So again, I don't know if you heard what I said, distinguish between open and active cases. So the issue here is that I don't dispute that your investigators have 25 or 30 open cases, but the whole point of doing the desk audit was to distinguish between cases which are open in the sense that they've been assigned but they haven't been inactivated or closed, and what they're actually working on. All the caseload standards that we've developed and other research agencies have done are all based on what is an active case, because what happens is that on many cases, you know, you get to a point you can't do anything more, but it still hasn't been cleared, or you haven't formally inactivated it, but nothing's happening on it. Nothing may happen for a couple of months, or maybe it has gone somewhere and you've issued a warrant, but the person isn't around, so you got to wait till you get the person. Those aren't active cases. So that may have happened 6 months before. There are open cases, sure, but we're trying to get to that body of what people are working on each month that represents real workload, where they've interviewed people, they've gone through the evidence, all that kind of stuff. So that was the purpose of the desk audits, and I don't know what happened on the communication on bringing a representative sample of work. We would have never said that, and I'm sorry if that was the impression that they had. So if we've got to do something to get better information about the active caseload, including going up there and re-interviewing people, well, I have to say we'll do that, but so anyway, we want good data too, just like you did.
Okay, fair enough.
Kerri from Records wants to say something. I want to go back to response time analysis, though, after she's done.
All right.
Okay, I want to point out on page 78, on your employee survey, the question was, we have sufficient record support in the department, where you indicate 80% of the people answered no, we don't have sufficient support. But in your report, you put that the performance of records processes, that there's over 80% of the employees who feel our support is insufficient. And I think the performance versus the support are two different things.
Did you hear that, Richard?
I did. Well, we did make some recommendations about dictation and other systems about processes to alleviate the workload, but
yeah, but that's not the point. The point is that the question was asked if records support was sufficient to the department, but you're making it seems like records isn't working hard to support the department. And when you change the questions in the wording.
Oh, sorry. We don't mean to give that impression at all. So that's part of the editorial process on a draft report.
Okay.
And then as far as the transcription, that's only one part of what we do, and you refer to that on page 80 and 81. And I provided a 4-page report that outlines all of our duties. So even if you take away the transcription and we do go to the RMS, we still have a 24-hour records unit that it takes all of our people, plus additional people, just to get all those 4 pages of duties done.
Understand that. That's absolutely correct. So that's something that we need to reflect in there.
And when you came and did your questions, you only talked to one person in records, which was me, and you were supposed to show up for one more interview, which with one of our records personnel, and you never showed up for that. And you didn't come and sit in records at all, so you really don't have any ideas how busy they are, and typing reports is just one fraction of what they do.
That's actually not true. We talked to multiple record supervisors.
You talked to one other records supervisor, and she was over there in investigations, going over the investigation stuff.
So let me give you a little background on this Dragonfly software, because I asked Bill Schueller to look into that several months ago. You have to have a separate licensing computer for each one of those to run on. And it has to be trained with a minimum of 2,500 words that you have to read into it ahead of time. And then you have to go back and do all the editing on it. And our analysis was it really wasn't going to save any time or money because it's just too expensive to buy all the computers, maintain all the computers, do all the licenses, and it really would slow the process because it's not all that efficient. So I'm not sure that I concur with that recommendation.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I think we have the cost incorporated in there, but
yeah, but you're only counting the license.
We recognize it isn't a pure savings. The people who were doing transcription before have to convert into quality control, and you might be right. It may not be worth it.
Yeah, because you're just you can't stack licenses on a computer, and each person has to have their own license because you have to train the software to your inflection, to your accent, to whatever you want to call it, and we just thought it was not a good recommendation, and therefore we didn't go forward with that thought process because we wanted to take some of that transcription off of them too so they could focus on data entry and other things, and it didn't seem like a feasible option.
For something that's a legal document, it's probably not there yet. It's probably good for 99 other uses, but not legal ones. So I think that's a really good point.
Okay, so let's circle back to response times for a minute because I really think that response times, when you talk about customer service of a department and the service we deliver to a community, I really think that we have to take response times into account. I don't think that our citizenry should have to wait, 4 hours, 6 hours to get a response on a cold burglary. But yet we're saying our patrol response or our patrol staffing is fine with no additional officers and CSOs. And without an analysis of response time and just looking at this arbitrary proactive time, I don't think that we're looking at what level of service we're delivering to the community when we say patrol staffing is fine. And there's no analysis. And actually you did tell me in my office that you were going to talk to council and set some parameters on what acceptable response times were, because those compute into total staffing. So
and we did in the best practices analysis, but I'm going to take you at issue on one other thing. Proactive time is not an arbitrary factor. It is the fundamental factor in patrol analysis and has been ever since the Kansas City preventive patrol experiment in the late 1970s. You cannot be effective unless you've got time to do something about problems in the community. And if you're always tied up and not having time to be proactive and just plain uncommitted, it's going to affect response times. So the problem that you had was that you overall have an adequate amount of proactive time, but it was poorly distributed. We had some ideas to better distribute it. We do have recommendations for additional staff, sworn and non-sworn, as well as workload reduction in other ways. So all those things are going to come together to augment further proactive time for patrol officers, which will impact response times and their effectiveness in the community, period.
I disagree that changing a shift schedule is going to reduce our emergency response time down from 16 minutes. And I think response times are a very important gauge of how well you're servicing a community, both on the emergency calls and the non-emergency calls. And when a person that's in trouble has to wait 16 minutes to get a police officer, I don't think that shifting around a shift schedule is going to reduce that dramatically. Although I'm willing to experiment with other shift schedules, but I think that just saying by changing the shifts, we're going to be able to reduce our response times to emergencies down to what is acceptable for a person that really needs help. When you're that first person getting out of the car and they're getting their butt kicked, I think that that's an important factor of how well we take care of our community. Not to mention the fact that I don't think my citizens should have to wait 4 to 6 hours to see an officer to take a police report. And there's no consideration on how long it takes us to get anywhere.
I have to look again at the data, but I don't think the average response time high priority calls was 16 minutes. So
I have that response time, and I gave it to Greg. Our average response time to a priority 1 call is 15 minutes and 58 seconds.
Well, the data we got from dispatch says something different.
Hey Greg, that's another thing we should probably look at, because what you're getting from that call for service log is the time that is punched over to the dispatcher. You're not getting the time that the call comes in necessarily. That data is really hard to interpret.
Do you think that on an in progress violent crime that they're going to take 10 minutes to dispatch it?
From the time the actual 911 call comes in to the time it gets sent over, and then the time of the officer's response? Are you saying it's a 6-minute response from the time it's dispatched?
What I'm saying, Richard, is we have 60 square miles to cover. And if the only available unit is on Oasis and they have to drive to Bonneview, they've got a lot of drive time. There's only 3 bridges across the river. The geographic analysis of looking at how we have to respond to emergency calls. There's guys in the room that still respond to them. My lieutenants here, ask them. And I think that
if you look at the report, we have the heat map analysis that shows that while you've got all those square miles to cover, the very vast majority of calls happen in the center of the city.
The very vast majority of the calls for service are nuisance calls created by homeless. Of course that's where the heat maps are going to be. If you know the city, you know that that's in our 2 commercial districts and the districts where there's a lot of resources. But our emergency calls where you have barricaded suspects or other things are going to be out in the residential areas. That's where the domestic violence takes place. That's where somebody's getting their butt kicked and we've got to get there quick. The stuff that's downtown that's reflected in that heat map is around our commercial districts. Of course that's where the calls for service are. That's where the concentration of people are.
No, when I said center of the city, I meant the urban core of the city, the denser areas of the city, to include the residential areas.
No, when I look at this, I've got the heat map sitting right in front of me. And it's downtown, it's Hilltop and Dana Drive where the mall is, and it's Lake Boulevard. It's our shopping centers, it's our downtown district where we have an intense amount of business, plus where all the resources are for the homeless population, and it's spread along our commercial corridors of Churn Creek, Hilltop, Dana Drive, and the mall.
So how many calls does it show out of the border of the city?
Well, it's shaded, so I mean, I don't have exact numbers based on your heat map, but what I'm telling you is that the heat map is showing a concentration of calls for service around our commercial districts.
Yeah, sure.
Which is what we would expect, because that's where there's a concentration of people. But that doesn't mean that we don't have emergency calls out in the residential districts at the far north end. I mean, it's like I told Greg when I talked to him. They're talking about putting a Costco on Oasis Road. That's the north end of our city's district. That's going to create a lot of calls for service.
Absolutely, and then you'll deal with that when that happens. But you know, several of the conversations I've had with you, I described the city of Reading as being like a mini county. So you've got an urban core with a downtown, you've got a residential areas which surround it, and then you've got something which is like a county outside of it, which is very almost rural in some places and very low density. You know, and if you live in a place like that, you can't expect the kind of service that you get in an urban core of the city. That's the consequence of living in a place like that. You can't promise to deploy people to provide an equal level of service throughout a city like Reading. Because you know what will happen? The people who are deployed in those areas will respond to like one call a day or 2 days or something like that. So it's just not what you can do. That's why sheriffs don't have the same kind of resources that police departments do for cities, because density does matter.
Well, I would hate to have to explain that to my community that lives in what are residential areas with open space in between, that I can't deliver a level of service to them. And I hope I hope when you present this, if you're going to stick with this analysis of patrol, that you explain to them that they have to expect a lower grade of service than what somebody does in Berkeley.
That's what I'm paid to do.
Hey, Richard, right?
Yeah.
This is Roger Moore again from Field Ops. You know, I was noticing in reference to Tier 1, which is a displaced person master plan, $310,000 annually, and then Tier 2 was a day center for $750,000 annually, and then Tier 3 were the 5 toilets for $500,000 with a $10,000 every year cost. That's about $1,570,000. I was wondering if when we talk about the 12-hour shift and a 42-hour work week, we ran some numbers, and that looks like the cost of that, based on what we charge for overtime on an officer, is going to be $391,000, $680. Did you get that?
The $391,000 for overtime.
Okay, so that's going to be built into that 42-hour work week, 12-hour plan. And was that factored into the document? I didn't see any numbers ran on that.
Well, you can have different kinds of 12-hour shifts that don't occur the overtime, where you do a mini shift. So you don't have to run the straight 12 to generate the automatic overtime.
Okay, I was just basing it on the 42-hour work week that was proposed in the document.
Yeah, maybe we need to show you some alternatives then.
Hey, Greg.
But you're right. If we're going to just show 42, then we need to show the overtime as part of that. But there are other shifts that don't generate the extra overtime.
All right,
Greg, I'll send you an alternative 10 plan, because you know right now, I mean, the 10 plan that's in here, half my department never sees a weekend day off. I'd prefer we stay away from something like that. That's why, you know, quite frankly, I don't care for the shift schedule we're on, because I see half my department, you know, during the week, and I don't see half of it on the weekends. But I'll send you an alternate that I think is better than this 10 plan. Plus, it saves us.
Could you send it to both? Could you send it to both of us?
Yeah. Plus, it saves, because there's an overlap day on Wednesdays. It gives us a lot more training time, and I don't have to expend a lot of overtime in training. That's why we went to the shift schedule we have now, because we were expending about $65,000 a year in overtime just to get our mandatory post-training done, because there was no embedded training time, and that gets quite expensive, especially as they're increasing our mandatory training time.
Yeah.
Koby, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I kind of want to switch things up to kind of a more philosophical question for you.
Okay.
If you just forget about all the statistics in here and just go off one of your opening statements in the discussion, was that we have ample staffing. That's your preliminary finding, right?
Yes.
And I understand that this is a draft report, but the community, I kind of liken Reading to sort of this sleeping giant that's starting to wake up, and I say that by virtue of the amount of people that are coming to town hall meetings, by the amount of volunteers that we have coming forward, and just a lot of suggestions on how to team up with us on different endeavors to help clean up the city and keep the community safe. But if you just philosophically go off of your statement, the inference, at least for me, is that we either don't know how to run a police department or that our officers are incompetent. And the way you guys are recommending we solve that is to follow some of your suggestions in this report. An example of that would be a different shift schedule. But we have played with different schedules. The chief and the captains have reallocated resources, taken personnel from traffic, for example, and putting them on patrol, and lots of things in between. And the net result still remains the same, that the community at large does not feel safe, the community is dirty, and the community believes, and this is the community's sentiment, that we need more police officers and more police resources to attack this problem. In other words, create maybe another department that gets to focus on projects that we would be able to work on during discretionary times. And those times to get the most work done does not happen between 2 in the morning and 7 in the morning. That's just not the time to work on POP projects. So I'm wondering how you can give us an end product that says we have enough people when everybody in this group, civilian volunteers included, say that that's not the answer. And so have you resigned yourself, as so far as this project's concerned, with not adjusting your position on that, and then that would inevitably force the chief to go to the community and say, what you've got is what you've got, because clearly the community is not happy with what we have. And I just don't see how we can change the community drastically without having more people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So let me say a couple things. First of all, let me say I'm sorry you interpreted our intention here the way you did. It wasn't our intention to say that you guys don't know how to run a police department at all. It shows that we've got a lot of rewriting to do on the police chapter. Having said that, as I said at the beginning of this meeting, we recognize that there are a lot of things in the broader delivery of police services that are particularly important for Reading that relate to things like what I'm calling displaced people in the community that we address in the report in terms of additional resources and additional programs. And as I said at the beginning of this meeting, it's a deficiency in the report, and as we look at the additional needs that the department needs to add, it's in those kinds of areas, whether it's additional CSOs or police officers to deal with displaced persons, whether it's more SROs, whether it's other problem-solving kind of resources. We recognize that, and we're going to put that in the report.
Here's the problem, Richard, and this is where I'm getting so frustrated, is that if you say that the department is staffed adequately, which is what your report says, and then you say, oh, but if you have more money, here's how you can grow the department. You've already killed the growing the department by saying we're staffed adequately. If you simply said in your report that here's a way that you might want to try to more efficiently utilize your personnel that you have now, I don't have a problem with that. But if you put the department is staffed adequately, you will kill our chances of getting anybody more, no matter what you make suggestions in your future, fund growth issues.
Well, Chief, I apologize. I thought that's the way we said it. I would heavily qualify and not use the phrase, in fact, staffed adequately. I thought that we had brought up a number of opportunities to improve it. But the final analysis is there's no money to give the city for the city to give you for these additional resources unless you've got another funding source.
Right.
So we need to make that clear where you need to get those resources from. What is the best use of additional resources if you get them, and the best use of existing resources now?
And I quote, current patrol staffing is adequate for the city. So if you say, here's the best use of that staff right now, however, your department needs to grow. Then, because if you say it's adequate now, and there's no funding, but if there's funding, here's how it should grow. But here, like I said, tell me where we can improve efficiencies now, but tell me how we can grow and how that should be utilized. And I'll tell you, if that's CSOs in patrol, that's great. I need them. But I still think we need more officers in patrol just based on the geography and the expectation of the level of service from this community. I think you're grossly underestimating that this community doesn't want to hear that they're going to get less service because they live in Redding, California. They want to hear how they're going to get the service that they expect. So I thought that was going to be part of this.
I think we're closer than parts of this conversation have sounded. So we've got a lot of rework to do on writing. We need to consider some additional data that you put forward. And I think we're saying the same thing. We're saying that there are needs in the community that cannot be met with existing resources. And so we will look at that.
Okay, and
so this is a draft report. This is not going to the city council as it is.
Okay.
So we have a little bit of work to do.
Okay, now second point. Jonathan Anderson is the executive director of the Good News Rescue Mission. And as he goes through the report, he just keeps saying, this day center, this is something we're already doing. This is something we're already doing. So before we suggest $750,000 for a day center, I suggest we talk to Jonathan about what they're already doing again. Second of all, this bathroom idea, there's a subsequent report from the city of San Diego that they've removed one of their bathrooms already because of a 131% increase in calls for service, and the other one is on the brink because of an 81% increase in calls for service surrounding that bathroom and related to it. So I'm going to send Greg and you some research that I had my crime analyst do on some of these suggestions on secondary reports that came after the initial study where they've been reversed or they've gotten rid of.
Sure. No, we need to look at that. I mean, obviously it's a mixed bag and you need to be flexible to deal with it. Other communities like Santa Monica, Palo Alto, and others which have homeless problems, they have had them and still have them. They haven't taken them out.
Well, the city of Santa Monica police chief is on the working group for homelessness for Cal Chiefs with me. The deputy chief is, and his story about what's actually happening with those is a little bit different than I think what you're getting. So maybe I need to talk to him and get some of that background.
I actually talked to him a couple of months ago.
I talked to him last week. So the other thing I want to say, and then I'll pass this on, I'm okay with Bob Brandon going out and cleaning up trash, but it is against the job classification, it is against the MOU, and it is against common police safe practice to have unarmed, untrained civilian CSOs go out and do enforcement on homeless people. So if we want to put together a softer approach like that, like we've done here already, it's going to have to be sworn staff, or I won't execute CSOs going out and doing enforcement on homeless.
Or combination?
Really, what I think is, I think that HHSA has to buck up, because what you're talking about is a social working outreach worker that's going to work with these people, and a mental health worker, and we've provided the police officer support to make them safe because their bosses wouldn't let them go out into the transient camps. So I think what you need is you need impact teams of a police officer and HHSA and mental health. That would make a bigger difference than 3 CSOs. And then when we create our neighborhood police unit, you got to understand that we're not, there's some accusations in this report in the way that it's written for this criminalization of the homeless. And I can tell you that we deal with a criminal transient population. We don't deal with homeless people. Jonathan deals with homeless people. We deal with the won'ts. He deals with the wills. If they want help, they need help, we'll get them help and we'll connect them with the resources. What we're issuing citations to are won'ts. They don't want your help. They don't need your help. They want to do their drugs, be left alone, and criminalize and victimize our community and leave trash all over the place, and that's who's getting these citations. If we go out and we talk to people and they want help, They get a ride to the mission. I just want to make that clear.
I think we need to talk about that, because I've got to tell you that there are other stakeholders out there, without naming names, both in the Health and Human Services community as well as your own department, that say that line is not as clear as you just described it.
Well, unless you give me names and you give me examples, I can't take a lot of action on that. So give me a call and we'll talk privately.
Richard.
Yeah, let's do that.
Can I address that day center side? Hey, Richard, Jonathan Anderson here, Good News Rescue Mission. Yeah, one of the things that I was really concerned about is the proposal or showing a 1% tax increase, $750,000 going towards a day center. And everything you listed, the center is partnered with local agencies. It provides medical, psychiatric, legal, employment services, housing, counseling, substance abuse, case management. Currently, the Good News Rescue Mission...
You're breaking up.
Basically, he read all the services that you're listing in the thing.
Yeah,
and
I gather that.
The Good News Rescue Mission is doing all of those already.
So yeah, that's actually something that we already do. This past year, we opened our campus to a day center schedule. Good example, last year we had 50 people who received employment through our Job Readiness Center. Now that we have that going, this year we're pacing to see 150 people, so tripling that number will receive employment, sustainable employment, just off of that end. Last year we had 200 people who received housing through our services. This year we're going to see a lot closer to the 300 to 400 people who will receive housing. So our day center that we've been working on has become highly effective. I don't see why you're proposing to use, and this is my opinion, but why you have a community who is very opposed to homelessness, yet you want to take their taxpayer money and make them fund homelessness, where you already have something that uses no taxpayer money to do that free of charge as a service to this community. And as we work more in partnership with Reading Police Department, with probation, with Shasta County Sheriff's Department, we are coming up with joint operations, contractual MOUs we have that address these issues collectively. I don't see the need for a day center and for $750,000 more. The other issue that I have with it, though, is you're suggesting to use volunteers, and that is a huge risk of liability, because the people we serve are mass manipulators who are drug-induced most of the time, and now you're putting untrained professionals in that situation. You're going to receive many more calls for service in that sense, because now you're going to have prostitution, you're going to have drug deals, you're going to have all those things happening, plus the liabilities when it comes to hands-on situations. That's just kind of my perceptions on that right there.
Well, I guess clearly we need to have some more conversation. I think in terms of the alternative, we were trying to come up with as many alternatives as we could to deal with what we're calling displaced personnel, individuals in the city, and coming up with, augmenting private nonprofits as well as county resources to be able to do that. And that's all we were trying to do. I guess I'm taking a practical approach, not a philosophical approach. The homeless and other displaced people, including people with mental health issues, they're not going to go away. So we need to have whatever resources we can to deal with them. That's all I'm trying to say.
I agree. That's a very valid point. I think that what the mission is doing is helping in that sense. We also have another consulting group that is auditing all of the social service side. They're going to release their report here, and I believe their recommendation focuses specifically on just social service side, the continuum of care council, and how all of us together, 50 social service providers here, how we better and more efficiently collaborate together to really end homelessness. And I'm sure that there'll be partnership recommendations with RPD, but I think that's something that really focuses more on social service side as opposed to the law enforcement recommendation side.
I agree, and that's really the sense that we were trying to give in that part of the report, and obviously we need to have some rewrites to do there. So I can talk to Donnell Ewart and find out about the study, which is close to completion.
Well, Kristen Schrader's doing it, not Donnell Ewart.
Yeah, and that's something that Kristen and I are actually both working on together. And so, I mean, you could either talk to Kristen or myself. Donnell is pretty detached from that side.
Okay, we'll do that.
Richard, this is Ed Rollman. I represent a business group here in Reading. I was born and raised here. You know, a lot of what Koby said earlier, we had a little discussion about how it used to be in Reading and how we used to be a little more proactive. And I think those of us that really love our community would like to see that happen again. Unfortunately, this report, you know, I've worked with consultants before many, many times. And in reading this, I'd honestly throw it out and start again. I think it was pretty poorly written. I think it was heavily skewed toward the homeless. And I'm going to push aside all the statistics because you guys already bashed that. And I think you're going to work that part out. But I don't think you came close to hitting the target on Reading's crime problem. Reading has a crime problem, not a homeless problem. I think we do a very adequate job with Jonathan's help, and I think Jonathan said it best, you know, how they work together and how we do things in our community with a whole bunch of volunteers and with actually very little revenue. We actually get a lot of mileage out of it. Somewhere along the line, I get the impression that you talk to a lot of people that were either homeless advocates or, you know, people that maybe don't understand the crime problem that exists today. And I'm talking about guys on bicycles that do drugs, that run around with backpacks on and go through the parking lots and beat up old ladies and steal purses and break into autos and, you know, cut fences and, you know, steal generators off the back of trucks. You know, I see it all. I'm in the hotel business, so I see a lot of that in the parking lots. I also am the leader of a group called the Reading Merchants Crime Watch. When I spoke to the gentleman that, I don't even remember who I talked to, but we talked a lot about that and about the crime problem. I'm concerned that this report is so skewed toward the homeless that it might not be something that can be pulled back. And I think our efforts are going to be to try to go out there and get an increase in sales tax from our community so that we can support the police department, fire department if necessary. But we're going to have a really hard time if that report comes back anywhere close to what it came back through in this draft. I just was really disappointed in it.
Well, I don't know. There's several things that you said that I'm not going to react to, and you've got your own opinions about the study. We actually didn't talk to that many people in the homeless group community, or homeless. We didn't talk to any homeless advocates, as you put it. We talked to County Health and Human Services program directors, and we talked to the Mission and a couple of other private nonprofits, and that was it. I think you got to go back to what is not in the report and what we said. We were adding to the report earlier about adding to special enforcement and other kinds of resources to deal with crime in the community and act as support for a sales tax increase. But I'm going to go back and say something else, that you can't discount the homeless community and in its various forms, including people with mental health issues and other displaced people. They are the number one issue relating to crime in Reading. And so our report is saying you need law enforcement, you need health and human services, you need private nonprofits to work together to deal with that.
And I'm going to respectfully disagree with that comment right there, because you're classifying the criminals as homeless, and that's not true. They're distinctly different groups, and I think that the way that this was written just sort of pushed it all into, hey, you got a homeless problem, not a crime problem, and that's the furthest thing from the truth. I know the difference between a criminal and a homeless person, and I'm sure you do.
Oh, really? I'm not even going to respond to that. I find that really distasteful.
Obviously, you're probably not.
So who else is next?
Richard, why don't you, you're in an airport, so are you traveling today?
Yeah, but I'm not traveling. I've gotten to where I need to be.
Okay, do you want to give me a call in my office, because I want to know exactly what you saw and what you're referencing, and then we can end the conference call, and then if you and Greg want to give me a call in my office?
Okay.
That work?
Let me have a few minutes, and I can do that. Can somebody text me your number, because I don't have it?
I don't know if I have your cell phone number.
I think
Oh, here, it's 65, I'll give it to you, 650-823-3174.
If we knew where this consulting firm
Okay.
was working from.
I will text you my number.
Okay, great.
All right, thanks, guys.
Bye.
Well.
Is
that what you wanted?
I wanted to hear from somebody other than me.
If you can find out from them what sources they're working from for us, because he had told you, he disagreed with you on a couple things, like, for example, how many officers per thousand, and then he cites.
He said IACP, or National Association.
I'd like to know what their
The focus was as is, no more money. Rich and I will go over the various methodologies and outcomes and discuss what changes are suggested as money availability increases.
Do them all day. That's all we do.
So we'll listen to what they have to say, but I'm still going to go over all my concerns with what they've presented so far. We'll see what their response to that is, and then we'll kind of go around the table. So, with respect to your individual divisions, patrol robbery, you have the lead, records, investigations, and we'll go through their stuff. And then from a community perspective, I had Mikey Murphy, the crime analyst guy, go through their report, and what they're not saying here is they're citing these things is that, for instance, the public bathrooms, San Diego put in 2. They've removed one of the 2 already because of a 130% increase in calls for service around that bathroom. The other one they've left in place for now because it only has an 81% increase in calls for service around that bathroom. Paliute that they cite in here for the homeless, encampments put out by the church. Their chief is speaking out against that and the increase in calls for service for vacancy threats. So they're all the things we would expect around something like that. So we'll talk to them about their lack of focus and looking at what the follow-up was rather than just some study that they used to put those things in place and not see what the effect has been since then. And I kind of, quite frankly, resent their accusation that we're criminalizing the homeless. What we're doing is holding them accountable for their misbehavior. So I'll cover a lot of that stuff, and then once we get into it, you guys can chime in. Obviously, Brian, I'm going to rely on you to go over, statistical problems with their data, because for those of you that weren't here the other day, I had Brian's got a bachelor's degree in mathematics, although I tried to give him a master's degree the other day. And Ed, I'll give you a copy of this. 4 of the 7 measurements that they're using to focus on this proactive time are actually estimates. They're not actual numbers that they derived from our information that we provided, and by adjusting their estimates by 5-10 minutes, you can see how much it throws off the percentages of their proactive time. And so I have some serious concerns that they did not do what they said that they were going to do and get. They told me they were going to get response times goals from council so that we can judge our staffing, ideal staffing, off of that. And they're not even looking at response times. They're not looking at geography. They're not looking at anything we said about emerging crime trends. They're not looking at response times to priority 1 calls for sworn staffing, priority 2 and 3 for sworn and non-sworn staffing and patrol. There's just a whole litany of things that it's like they just breezed over and didn't even pay attention to what we talked to them about. And I mean, their caseload numbers for investigations are just, they're 1/3 of what they actually are. So I don't even know where they got that data. They talk, their numbers aren't even accurate on scaling salaries. So we'll go through all that with them, and I'll kind of run through our list of concerns and then let them respond, and then we'll go by division and go around the table is what I think. So do you want to call in and we'll get this thing started?
It's not till 2 o'clock.
That part's.
Okay, they're not coming on until 2, so we have some time to talk about this. I forgot about that, sorry. So I don't like, I mean, they are suggesting that we go to a 10 plan, but the 10 plan that they have, we talked about this a little bit the other day, 50% of the department never sees a weekend off. There's better 10 plans than what are in here than what they're even discussing. And that's something, obviously, when we talk about 10 plans versus 12s. Their 12s have 4 hours of embedded overtime a week, which costs a lot of money that they're not taking into account in here. What is it, 300 and something thousand a year?
But 2 hours a week, you know, for 60-some officers, it's $391,680 annually.
So they're not taking that into account, and they're also not taking the RPOA and the RPMA MOUs into account, that we, you know, it's a negotiable item to change to a full straight 12, or, you know, some of these other, you know, shift plans or something we want to work with our unions with, rather than just imposing things. So there's some...
On that note, I brought up to Bill's attention, if you go through the studies, in our portion, they're advocating that we go to a 12-hour. If you go to the jail section, it's citing all these studies about why you should go to 12. So, I mean,
they're
totally
contradicting each other. Yeah, different study groups. I think if they had work in jail versus police.
Why would they make suggestions in here that would cost us a lot of money and then turn around and tell you that this draft product was based on no new tax measure, so they only went to a specific point and stopped, yet the whole thing's laden with ways to improve our department that has a price tag attached to it? I don't understand that.
I don't understand a lot of it.
It just it seems
It doesn't
contrary
make
to
any
me.
sense. I really don't. I mean, even if you look at, you know, we need a lot of the things they say about Sage, we're already doing in Sage. You know, Cintiff, if you look at, because I had to look at dictation software in their discussion about going to this Dragonfly software. You have to train it to your own voice. So you've got to read 2,500 words into the thing before it's trained to you. Every person has to have their own license, which means it's got to sit on its own computer. And they're not taking all of those factors into account. I think they just got some wild hair idea, like I did, and said, hey, let's look at dictation software. Well, then when we really did the research, we found out it doesn't work. And, you know, Mary did medical dictation for years, and now they're going to that software, but now the girls that were dictating are now editors, because it doesn't get everything right. So they're making a lot of assumptions on how well things will work without actually having the practical knowledge of trying to apply it. And that's where I think that they have some serious problems. They're computing our corporals inaccurately into our patrol staffing. That's not what their job duties are. You know, we try to keep a supervisor on each side of the river, and the corporals are there to fill in on a beat if they absolutely have to. But the corporals are supervisors, and they're equating this as part of the police officer total number to even get their proactive time. I just feel that these guys, in my opinion, thus far, and I don't know that they'll change that today, I feel like they were very disingenuous with us when they were meeting with us and talking about the things that they were going to do that just they didn't do. And they're basing all of the patrol staffing off of this one arbitrary 40% number for patrol proactive time, when they, in Richard Brady's own words, was a good community policing department has 60% proactive time. So there's just a whole lot of stuff that they're not taking into account. The day center, I talked to Jonathan, he's on his way, he's leaving a lunch meeting. Most of the duties that the day center does, or they're proposing, the Good News Rescue Mission already does. And most of the duties that they're assigning to these CSOs and police officers are social services jobs that we really, I don't think, want to take over from them. I very much, quite frankly, resent the fact that they're talking in here like the police department is criminalizing the homeless, when really what we're doing is holding them accountable for their poor behavior. And there is an entire theme to this thing comparing us to LAPD and that we're criminalizing the homeless. They're not, I don't like it at all. There's no talk of traffic or consideration of traffic. There's no discussion of the 29% crime increase that took place after AB 109 went into effect. So we're supposed to assume that that's the new norm. There's just a whole lot of things in here that I don't care for and that they didn't, I don't think they considered when they looked at patrol staffing. So.
Do you know what they're talking about or have been a part of this 2011-12 action plan?
I have no idea what that is.
Page 13, that's what they refer to.
Nobody seems to know what that is. I don't know what it is.
Is that the Department of Housing thing?
I think that's one Brian.
Alice, you probably know, but
I would just ask them, just instead of telling them how screwed up, ask them where they got this information, how they come to these numbers, and that might give us a better idea and readily identify why they're screwed up. Because if we just start telling them how screwed up, they may say, oh, wait a minute, this is what we're basing it. So I don't know what they're basing much of this stuff on. You know what I'm saying? I hope that they can explain that, because it's very, very difficult to even follow along with this.
I can. I mean, I can start that way. I was going to go through and give them all of my concerns and say, here's what I see based on what I read right now. It's very, very hard to follow. It's very, very poorly written. It looks like, quite frankly, you've cut and pasted out of a lot of things that you found, but haven't done the secondary research to find out that those things have now been reversed. You know, you're citing cities that now have more vagrancy and, you know, ordinances and things than other cities around them. You know, you're citing these toilets, and San Diego's had these problems. So I really, Greg is trying to put lipstick on a pig here by saying, well, this is, in my opinion, hey, this was just based on your current, you know, staffing levels. But even at our current staffing levels, how can you say it's with no money when you're suggesting spending $500,000 on toilets and $750,000 on a homeless day center? So I don't, there's a lot of things in here suggesting that are MOU issues that we haven't even, you know, obviously we'd have to, you know, have negotiation and discussion with the RPOA and the RPMA to make some of those MOU issues and changes. But, you know, if you look at the simple job classification of the CSO, they can't go out and do enforcement like these guys are suggesting, and quite frankly, they won't. So there's a lot of issues there, and I think that, you know, quite frankly, I think that if these guys did present this study in its current form at a city council meeting, I think, you know, Bob Blankenship said, if it's that ludicrous, just sit back and let the citizens take care of it. And I think that there would be, and if they published this before they presented it at a council meeting and let people see the approach that they're trying to tell us to take, I think that there would be a lot of business people and community people there screaming louder than the police chief would. I think one's sitting to my right, quite frankly.
Well, you know, just a couple of comments. You know, when I was being interviewed by this guy, one of the questions I asked him was who were the people he was talking to. And I honestly don't think they picked enough names out there of the community at large to talk to that would have given him honest answers. I suggested a couple of people when he was talking to me just because they weren't on his list. And, you know, when you read this thing, just from a layman's standpoint, you know, I have to cut through all the percentages and all that stuff, and I got to take it that you guys have already put all that, you know, you've taken that into consideration. That's, you know more about that than I do. But they missed the mark on a couple of things, and I think the thing that stands out the most is when they start including the homeless in the criminal issue. That's wrong. And unfortunately, you know, 3 or 4 years ago when we came together as a community and started doing a lot of meetings through the Crime Watch or whatever groups out there that have had their meetings, we used the term homeless, and we didn't understand the definition of it. Now, I'm not sure that they do. I'm not sure that they define the difference between, there were a couple of things in there where they talked about panhandling and transients and all that stuff, but it was limited. And really and truly, those are the people that are my concern. They're not the homeless. The homeless are the guys that, you know, how do you say it, the wants?
Yeah.
Those are the wants, the people that we
want help
need
to get
to
help
take care of, and Jonathan works with them, and we hopefully make their lives better. They threw that in there, and I think that should have been a totally different section, all of its own. It doesn't have anything to do with you guys. You guys are the ones dealing with, you know, the guys on the street that are walking around with the backpacks and riding the bikes. Those aren't homeless people. Those are thieves. They're people that are out there doing no good, and I just don't get how they didn't pick up on that. I know they rode around with a lot of guys, you know, a lot of different officers. They had to have seen that, you know, and I get the impression maybe that they got a couple people chirped in their ear that had issues with how that was being dealt with, but gosh, it just seems like they didn't go out and talk to enough people that really see the thing as it really is for our community. It just doesn't, it's not a good picture of it.
That's a good point. And to the ride-along part, I don't think any of them that were involved in this did a ride-along, except for one guy.
One guy did 2 ride-alongs.
So
That's
we're
it.
headed to.
Yeah, within the first 1 or 2 days that they were here, they did.
That's it. The other guy that was supposed to do, he canceled.
They should have done a dozen ride-alongs just to see what goes on in the city, different hours.
That's huge to go on 2 ride-alongs and then come up with hard numbers on how long it takes to write police reports. Longs and here and there and just guess.
Another thing that they did throughout the report is they refer to them as displaced. That artificially inflates the numbers because you could have somebody that is employed, has a family, their credit is so screwed that they can't rent a house. They live in apartments, they're not homeless, right? But now you lump them into displaced and now you're inflating your numbers. So I got a problem with
Well, yeah, displaced would suggest that they're here for some reasons beyond their control, and a lot of them are here.
Displaced people.
Yeah, exactly. Are they displaced, are they transient, are they homeless, are they urban campers, what is it? But the displaced persons, that's what he refers to them most of the time. And I think a lot of them that I contact every day are here by choice.
Well, you take this thing, it's this thick, your portion of it. You take out the homeless stuff, it's probably only about that thick, the real data, the real life, real things that are going on out there. And I just don't think they spend enough time. Personally, to me, that's the biggest issue in our community today. And really it gets the smallest amount of attention. Something's wrong there.
I didn't hear what he said because I had to go to Jonathan because he's late. So as far as format with these guys, and we got about 40 minutes, what do you guys think? Do you think I should let them start off describing their methodologies and stuff to the group, or should I
That's
ask them how they came up with it, or should I just punch them in the nose?
He pretty much gave you the excuse right there in his email.
Well-
That's what he's trying to fall back on.
But even then, I mean, I agree with Koby. I mean, you're telling us to spend money, but you're saying this is based on existing funding.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think he's just trying to cover his butt right there.
Well, Kurt had a discussion Friday with Richard Brady, and Kurt basically told him that reading the report, he was very underwhelmed, that they need to hire an editor, because when you pay $150,000 for a report, it shouldn't be wrought with, grammar and typos and everything else. He didn't do anything with any of the future funding. He says they're going to describe to us what they think the police department should get with future funding. But I don't know. He also told him you have a very unhappy police chief. So we'll see how they come into this. But he also said that Richard Brady stood pretty firm on his analysis of patrol, and I completely disagree with him. If he's going to say that we're good, he obviously has no experience in policing whatsoever and shouldn't even be doing these studies, because I disagree 100% they're using a national standard and average for fire, but they're not doing that for police. And I did the math this morning. If you base it on 90,000 at the national average of 1.8, we should be at 162 sworn, and we're sitting at 102. So, I just don't see rearranging a shift schedule being something that's going to fix the problems. And what they were asked to do was do a staff study on what, here's unlimited funding, here's what the police department should be, and I don't see any of that. Maybe incrementally.
Weren't they asked to look at that from a standpoint, Chair, chair. Weren't they asked to look at this from, and if we had a 0.25% increase, a 0.5% increase, 0.75%, 4%, weren't they asked to study that?
Yes, Kurt talked to him about that too, and told him that's not in here. So that may be what they're going to talk about today, but still, it should be, here's ideal staffing for the police department. But if you had 5, 10, 15, or 20 million, here's how we would suggest you spend money, citywide.
And maybe that's where they got on page 5. They put $5, $10, and $15 in revenue attachment. But they don't say, what is that?
$5, $10, $15.
What does that mean? Is that a sales tax? Is that cross-reference to tier 1, tier 2, tier 3? What does that have to, nothing is cross-referenced.
Well, they reference it in the executive summary, but then they never touch on it again. And that's what Kurt...
Because it's pasted from some other reports.
That's where Kurt hit him on the other day.
And that's the comment that, the people that I know that have read this, they're like, it's a cut and paste draft. Yeah.
So I've got everybody's consolidated list here of their comments, and then I have this, analysis of it where, like I said, Mike Murphy actually went on every point they made for the homelessness, went back to those cities and found reports that came out after the study that they're using that basically they've either reversed what they're doing or they're about to reverse what they're doing because of the major problems that they've been having. So Mikey did a really good job. I mean, this is from the Portland paper talking about the maintenance costs and what San Diego's done to remove them and how much money they're costing and how many problems they're causing, and calls for service around things that they, so.
You can do a quick Google search of Palo Alto and it sees, exactly what's happening because they have a lot of people that live in their vehicles in the city. Now they're complaining about it because they have people urinating everywhere and causing disturbances. And, so now it's coming up again.
So I will tell them that in the end, we'll take this consolidated list of comments and send it to them and go through. They can go through and look at all of these. So, Brad, what do you got? Anything?
I don't think you guys covered it very well.
Brian?
Nothing new.
Koby?
Well, I share the same concerns that Eric has. I think if we open this up and just lambast them with all these things that we think are erroneous, that he's just going to shut down. But if we say, this report is not only a huge surprise to us, but we're really disappointed in it because clearly the city is not happy with the nature of how things are going, and your suggestion that the police department not change in terms of staffing is not going to do anything to address these concerns. But the thing about this in my mind that sticks with me the most is this. I think you can come up with a bunch of different statistics to support your study, and like Jeff said, statistics can be the greatest liar, but what people are bothered with now is the feeling that the city is dirty and unsafe. And those feelings are never captured in statistics. And frankly, there's probably a lot of things that these homeless people do every day that never gets reported to us. So why I say that is because the best way to take care of that sentiment is to get out in front of that kind of crime, which we don't do anymore. And that's something that we prided ourselves in doing as a police department all through the late 80s and all through the 90s, was we had a reputation for being extremely proactive. And we got out ahead of crime. And there's nowhere in this study that would allow for us to go back to those times. And a lot of people will point to those times and say Reading was at its best when we were partnering with crime-free housing. We were at schools. Butch was doing some stuff at that place over on Trinity Street where you were with these at-risk latchkey kids and you were just getting together with kids and helping become, mentors to them and getting them involved in programs that would never allow them to have that idle time. And the list goes on. We had little NPU offices in different parts of the city, wherever there were hot spots, and this doesn't allow for any of that.
It actually steers you away from that, the broken window.
It really-
They said, don't do that anymore.
It really
Those are
is going to,
nuisances, They're not crimes.
And so, while I take exceptions with the numbers, if you just go off this, and you're going to add a couple CSOs to be the liaison to homeless people, and what else? You need to be more transparent and talk more with the community and, show them what we're doing and then give them progress reports. That's really it for me. That's really what I'm left with from this.
Well, they
And
said
we
the
don't
chief
change
needs to
anything.
connect with more groups. I'm not sure what other group in town I haven't spoke with already.
Yeah, you've made yourself available more than most chiefs have here, so I don't understand that at all. But beyond all that, this doesn't allow for us to go back to those glory days when we had enough people to do proactive police work. The only people that are doing that now are, probation, parole, gang unit, and that's not as often as it once was. And maybe somebody in the wee hours of the morning between, say, 2:45 and 7. That's it. That's your proactive time now.
You know, Koby, you hit on something that I don't think that the entire public really understands. You know, they start talking about the revolving door at the jail, and the comments will be, well, why do you want to hire more cops if you can't put them in jail? Well, the reality of it is we're going back to what you just said we used to be. And I think that really and truly is what most people that have been here for a long period of time, that's what they want for this community. And I don't know, again, I go back to these guys not talking to the right people, because I think if they would have talked to the right people, they would have heard that. You know, I'm a firm believer that if we get bodies out there that push some of these people we don't want to be in this community around a little bit, it doesn't matter whether we put them in jail or not, they're going to move on. They're going to stop doing the things they do down by Black Bear Diner and Circle K and 99-cent store. Now they're moving over into that Lowe's parking lot. You know, they're there all the time now because nobody's pushing them around. You know, nobody's saying anything to them because you guys don't have time. And when I go out on my property and do it, I get them off. But you know, the other guy, I might not get the same one back every day, but I'll get a new one tomorrow. Just because there's so many of them, and they're everywhere. You know.
Well, someone had suggested it's like they weren't listening to us, because I spent an hour and a half with that guy. I said, let me tell you what my memory is of this department, how it once was and how it is now. When we had a full complement of CSOs and our response times were like 4 minutes, you know. Let me tell you how it was and how it is now. This is what we would like to get back to. In fact, we jokingly said, you know, this chief isn't asking for much. He just wants to be back to where we were. And no, don't give us any extra.
Yeah.
Get us back to the levels we were in the early to mid 90s. We would be really happy about that. But it's almost like they weren't listening. There's nothing in here that addresses ways to get back to where we were.
Because I did talk about the history, just like you're saying, you know, what it was like, you know. I'm one of the few people probably they talk to that can remember that.
Yeah.
You know, because, in all frankness, I just don't think they talk to the right people. I just think that's...
And the people they did talk to, I don't think they listened.
You miss them being disingenuous. And like Koby said, you know, you sit down with this guy for an hour and a half, and they want to know what they should be looking at to get a feel of our community. And, you know, they're so heavy on the one, looking at CAD reports that they apparently didn't understand anyway, because they never got back with you to understand those. But, you know, I talked to them about what happened with our community, where people, maybe a lot of it's not reportable stuff, but the feeling, the overall sense of crime that's in our neighborhoods and our communities and our stores and everything else. So go and talk to all these big major box retailers that now have, you know, security guards stand at the front doors in uniform. You didn't have that 5 years ago. Now every store you patronize has security standing there because they're getting rifled with crime every single day. Oh yeah, I'm just taking notes. We'll go and talk to all those people, and I'm giving them a laundry list of those businesses. None of that's mentioned. They didn't follow up on any of those kind of things that we talked about.
They clearly see all of the transients and homeless as victims, and that's the way this is.
That's a good point.
And our issue is the ones we deal with are criminals.
Well, and that's one of the things that frustrates me about this is that it's, you know, they talk directly about criminalization of the homeless, and they compare us to LAPD, you know, and those types of things, when really what we're doing is we're holding criminal transients accountable for their actions. You know, if you're going to steal, if you're going to urinate in public, if you're going to go drink in the parks, I'm sorry, but that's not criminalizing them, it's holding them accountable. And there are resources for them to go to here, and I agree with what Jonathan said the other day. You know, what they're saying this day center should do, they already do. But we can't get this population to want to go. And that's where this wide-eyed, idealistic view that they're bringing here obviously shows me they have never driven a patrol car. Because that population just does not want to go there, and they won't go.
People that want to get help, that are truly destitute. Jonathan and crew helps them, right? These are the people that want to get a job, want to get educated, want to get help. There's help out there for them. These other folks don't want it, and they choose a lifestyle
And we have to have discretionary time to address big problems. We just do. We encourage the officers to open these POP projects, and that's the expectation. And they do that, I think, partly because it's expected, but also because they want to do that. But to do it right, you have to have discretionary time. The only way to have discretionary time is to have more people. There's just, I just
There's no
don't
way
see
to create that with a shift
how
schedule
can you
change.
create that by putting more overtime on the hallway for officers to fill vacancies with a different shift schedule? All that's doing is plugging holes on the shift to just field calls for service.
Well, and I told Greg, we can't necessarily shift staffing to the busier times because I can't leave 3 guys on graveyard to cover 60 square miles. I'm not the sheriff. I got to make sure that the people, there's a safety factor that comes into this as well that we've been skirting on for a long time. And quite frankly, we've got pretty lucky, that with the drive time, I'd hate to have one of our officers on a fight at the boat ramp on Bonneview and the only cop available just cleared TROs. That's a long time to be in a fight by yourself.
We could have, the chief could ask us to, focus on whatever, cell phone tickets, cell phone violations or seatbelt tickets, and ask the whole shift to do that. And in between their calls for service, you might get 1 or 2 or 3 tickets at the end of a 10-hour shift. You put 1 or 2 guys out on a grant-funded operation like that, and they'll do more than the entire department in a few hours. And that's what I'm talking about. If you can get people away from the servicing the community's call for service and let them focus in on a problem, you get tremendous results. And there's nowhere in this report that allows for that.
Well, did I misread the way the report said it too, that, it was talking about the number of officers that you have out at any one given time, which is usually somewhere between, 14 to 16 officers is what I get.
7 if it's one shift, 7 to 9 if you count.
No, but I mean, if guys are hurt and stuff, if they're not.
No, we have a minimum shift of 7 officers, and then we have a supervisor per shift. So when there's an overlap, then we have, upwards of 14, but that's only for, a certain portion of the day. It's, at night.
I'm talking about total staffing to that 102 level that you're talking about. They wanted to include the 16 officers that are always hurt. They said if they're there, then, we're putting it back into the thing. And I'm like, well, they're always going to have that many.
Exactly. So they included those. They included our corporals.
Right, to get to the level they wanted to.
They included the 7 in training. They included all those in a perfect world of, having all those hit the streets.
So that's just, well, they also say we have a chronic vacancy problem, and I take exception to that because, we have a chronic injury problem, but we don't have a chronic vacancy problem. I mean, we hire people as fast as openings come up. I got 1 vacancy right now, and I got 2 anticipated in December, and we've already got 3 in background. So as soon as those guys retire in December, we'll fill those 2 spots right away. So, I don't know whether they're talking about it with respect to injury. Well, then call it a chronic injury problem because vacancies are unhired positions, and we don't have a problem with that. Just because we've hired 35 people, in 3.5 years that I've been chief, doesn't mean we've had vacancies for long periods of time. Except for injuries and other issues waiting for discipline proceedings to take place. But
and also, we're losing technically 4 positions in a year and a half. Right, so those 4 positions we just got are gone.
So
they don't add those in and say, hey, by the way, anticipate 4 officers leaving in a year and a half, because that's what's going to happen.
They basically granted themselves 4 police officer positions out of the reserve for 2 years. But if the budget doesn't grow, those 4 new positions go away.
Chief, one thing I want to say is we've had 2, 3 people who are not part of this police department that all concur with our opinions on this. And I don't know what other people like Kurt have shared with you, but the fact that nobody that I've talked to says, oh, you're all wet on this and here's why, makes me think this is a bad product. Nobody within our group is arguing the merits of this in their favor.
Well,
overall,
realistically, even if you look at this, to me this looks like a very homeless-oriented report and a very social service-oriented report. And quite frankly, Not even the guy that runs the homeless mission agrees with the report. So, but there's other people that have looked at it too. I haven't got any feedback from Jason or Dennis as of yet. Dennis was in here the other day and hadn't had a chance to go through the whole thing yet.
Is it possible that someone outside of this group or outside of the police department has influenced this report to end this way that we wouldn't know about? Because it's almost, who got,
Well,
It's
part
obvious
of
you
this,
talked to somebody in the homeless.
part of this on the county side is HHSA. And here's what I will tell you. There was a email sent out on an event that Basenko's holding, and one of the HHSA staff sent an email to SCAR, which he overlooked the fact that Captain Moore is on the SCAR board, saying, well, maybe we can ask the sheriff about the criminalization of the homeless as well. So Basenko's already screamed at him, screamed at his supervisors, just waiting for Danelle Ewert to get back, because that's a staff member of county HHSA saying things like that law enforcement is criminalizing the homeless. So, and the HHSA and mental health is part of the county's portion of this report that's not in here. So, I don't know. I don't know where they got this. They were asked to look at police, they were asked to look at fire, jail, and mental health. This whole thing looks like they were asked to do a study on homelessness. And I think they missed the focus, quite frankly. Mary, Joe Sadowski's out there. We didn't cancel my meeting with him today. Can you go tell him I'm sorry? And that I'll give him a call this afternoon or see if we can link up with him tomorrow.
Is he downstairs or up?
He's out here waiting for me to open the door. Oops.
he can handle it.
Smoking Joe Sadowski. So, I'm real pleased with the amount of time and effort everybody's put into, going through this in detail, and we got a lot of very good feedback by page, and I'm probably just going to email this whole list to them of things so that they can look at it and say, "Ooh, yeah," because I'll tell you what, on all the homeless stuff, old Mike Murphy, man, he took him to task. He did a really good job of like Brian did of going through the numbers. Mike did it on all their lack of citation of studies and studies that came after, or results that came after the implementation study that they're citing. So that'll be maybe good for them to read. But I think we've got about 20 minutes before they get on the line. So
I got one more thought.
oh, okay. See how is Mary bringing it?
The message I got from this whole report was that your crime problem and your homeless problem and your transient problem is here, and there's nothing that you can do about it. I think that I agree with Ed is that they did not take into account the community that we have, because this is not Portland, this is not Seattle. The people here don't want Portland or Seattle. They didn't take that into account. I think that they're expecting for the community to read this and go, oh yeah, this is exactly what we want. That's not what they want. And if the message of this is what you have is inevitable and there's nothing you can do about it, I don't think the public is going to swallow that at all. They're going to shove it right back in their face. That's what I think. Because it's just not reflective of the attitude of this city. It's just not.
But I don't think they did this to cater to the community. When I talk to the guy, he goes, hey, the numbers are going to speak for themselves. We're going to look at it.
That's not
And
what
I see this as really slanting them with a biased way towards kind of interjecting their thoughts on the homelessness and how they should be dealt with, and kind of use bits and pieces and parts and slivers of studies to kind of bolster that.
I think they listen to HHSA a lot and some of the folks over there, but
Somebody got
I know that they've done it.
or that's their own print on their own.
But they've also done similar studies in very liberal areas and probably got a way different response than what they're getting from us. They probably got, oh yeah, that's exactly what we need, and it's not what.
But they mentioned Portland, and if you remember, Pete, that very first meeting, we came to our staff meeting and said Portland thought they had a big disparity in their workload and the number of people they had, and we proved they didn't.
I remember.
and they were very unhappy with that. So they're maybe used to this. And I don't look at Bill and I looked at several from back east where the police departments were extremely unhappy with their work product. And they're like,
Aaron Moretti just pulled up a survey today and saw the same thing. He was reading one, they did the same thing.
This may not be new to them.
Yeah, this is what they do, I think.
You know, Portland, in fact, was one of them that wasn't happy with their own
Portland,
city.
Hanford, Connecticut, I think.
Maine or
You know, the only, here's the only thing we can do, and Kirk told him, hey, your numbers are your numbers, we asked you to do this assessment, we're not gonna tell you or dictate to you that you're gonna change it. The only thing that I can do is give them our feedback today. If they insist on keeping it this way, then when they present this to council, then I'll present this. And that's all of our, you've got wrong numbers here, you're doing this wrong, your case numbers. I mean, they're showing you with what, 8 cases per investigator, you've got like 27?
Some cases,
Yeah, so, you know, right there, based on their own ratio, you said, what, it should be 18 or 20 investigations instead of 9?
Way more.
Yeah, so, you know, we'll just point that out to them, and we'll point it out to council, and really, I'll say what I said the other day, is that, you know, it's a very simple question from me to council. If you want to believe this, or you want to believe the police department's assessment, do you feel that public safety is better today than before you cut the police department? Kind of going back to what Koby and Ed were talking about. Do you feel it's better today than before? And if your answer is no, then you might want to listen to your police department.
And you focus on, you mentioned with Pete, just on open cases. How many cases touch your hand throughout the day?
I've got a stack of
Tons.
100 right now.
They'll
in
go
my
through it
inbox.
and they'll deactivate, or, you know, they'll hold them and, or close them, keep some of them open. And it's not just their open cases they're working, they're going through a
That's
ton
right.
of cases.
I think one thing we have to demand out of them is to get a national average in there, just like
They refuse to do it.
Yeah, they said they refused to do
Yeah,
it.
because I talked to them about that originally, you know, 1.6 to 1.8 officers per thousand, but if you look at the national average for cities between 50 and 99,000, it's 1.8 officers per thousand. He said, we don't use any of that because it's just too arbitrary.
But they do
yet-
it for the fire department.
Yeah, they use the national standard for fire departments.
We need to push them on that.
But here, you're using an arbitrary number like proactive time as the only measure of patrol staffing.
If we
That's why I
force
say
them to
you're
do
not-
the national average, that'll be our proof right there.
The national average would put us at 162 if you use the bedtime population, not the daytime swell that we get. But realistically, even that, I mean, if you want to do an analysis outside of that, then you have to look at what is the goal for priority 1 response time? What is the goal for priority 2 and priority 3 response times? That gives you, you know, how many CSOs you're going to need, how many officers you're going to need. You have to look at the geography of the city. They don't take traffic into account. They don't take emergency crime trends with prostitution and heroin. Jeff had a long conversation, Pete did with him, about heroin and how bad it's coming into this community and how we need more drug enforcement because 5 guys for the county just isn't enough. And when we talk about 5 guys, now I think it's 6 because I think Anderson put a guy out there, but still, 6 guys working drug enforcement. We're not talking about the city of Reading. We're talking about Shasta County. There's 6 guys.
They didn't even really address that in
No.
any detail.
So you mentioned them and they took it.
Just like traffic, it's just like kind of like,
You know, we pulled, what, 2 16-year-olds out of the Reading in the last month? You know, but they don't talk about the prostitution problem. We talked to them about Reading Backpage and all the, it just, they didn't, I don't think they listened to
What they said about Sage, somewhere there, they said they were flexible.
Yeah. Yeah, 109, Sage works with multitude of things, but they call them flexible. I remember.
I didn't get that.
That was a question mark.
If we're paying their bill and we tell them to put the national average in compared to where we're at, they should be putting it in if we're paying them.
What's that? Sorry.
If we're paying their bill and we tell them to put the national average in, they should put it in.
The city manager doesn't, otherwise, why hire a consultant? So his point is give them the feedback, but their analysis is their analysis. And if that's their analysis, then we're going to do our own.
They
And I'm
can
gonna
stay with
present
their
that.
analysis, but they need to know the national average. And we're
No, I'll do that.
Are the fire in the county as bad too?
No, fire is, I think, an increase of 9 or 12 firemen to get them to the national standard. But there's no national standard addressed for the police department. So apparently there's no crime and the city's burning down. But, you know, I'm not going to fight with the fire guys. You know, not having 3 guys on a fire truck means they have to sit out front and spray water. They can't make entry into a fire because California OSHA standard, you have to have 2 guys on a hose to make entry into a fire. And if that's my house burning down,
I want them to go into that. So I'm not going to argue and fight against our own fire department. But the fact that you're using a national standard for them but not using a national average for us just is, they didn't do any of the analysis on staffing that they said that they were going to do for us. They didn't take response times into account. They didn't take geography. They didn't take so many things into account when judging. He told me, and I quote, "What is your standard emergency response time set by council? What's your goal response time?" I said, "I don't have one." He said, "Well, we need to get them to set one because that plays into how many officers you have to meet that." But yet, where is that analysis? It's not in there. The whole thing for patrol is based on this random proactive time that they're going to fix just by changing shifts.
I just think that's an unfair question to begin with. The response time should be whatever it takes to keep the community safe. That's what it should be. I mean, how could you expect someone to go, "Oh, we would like an average response time of 8 minutes." Okay, so you would like the officers to take 8 minutes to get to you when someone's booted your door in and is killing or maiming one of your family members.
Yeah, but if you did 8 minutes for us, that means you have to double patrol. Because right now we're at 16.
That's why it's not a fair question. It's a political question that's going to have money and all kinds of other considerations attached to it.
Absolutely it is, but that's what council's elected to do. So realistically, when I handed him the as I've called it, Rob's La La Land, now I call it Rob and Koby's La La Land because he helped me put it together and he's just as much to blame. You know, we came up with 174 sworn and 26 CSOs. He said, "Yeah, Chief, but that's based on the service level you think you want to give this community, not what council expects." Well, I guess I'm just a dummy that doesn't know what the hell he's doing. So, you know, there was the way I put that together when Koby and I think Roger was in there, is we started with, this is the officers we need in these positions. And then we built the leadership over the top of that. I think we had all the lieutenants in there when we did that. And we built the leadership from the bottom up. Here's what we need from our officers and CSOs to service the community, and here's the leadership it takes to run that organization, and that's how we got to that number, rather than just some arbitrary statistic. You know, I'm sorry, but we need a street crimes unit to do exactly what Ed talked about. You can call it neighborhood police unit, you can call it street crimes, whatever, but they need to be out doing spotting missions for dope. They need to be, I hate to use the term because it sounds offensive, but in-your-face policing, where every time one of these guys turns around, "Hi, I'm Officer so-and-so, what you doing today?" You know, every single time, because that is a deterrent to crime. You know, we need double the people in patrol, 2 officers and a CSO per beat for days and swings, and then 1 car per on the graveyard shift, but it needs to be a 2-person car for the officer's safety.
I'd like to know where the arbitrary numbers come up, you know, the 35 to 50%. You know, they won't use a national average because they say it's not supported by any kind of data.
Where do you come up with this?
But you come up with these arbitrary numbers with no litmus test on how you got to say 40% is where you need to be for proactive time. So all these, and it goes right along hand in hand with their 4 out of 7 points that they're using for
Our estimates.
It's just haphazard.
Yeah, I don't.
I spoke with Mike Dahl, who was sitting on with the group for the fire department, and he wrote an email back and copied me on it. And I thought he had some really good points in there. And the point that made the most sense to me when you start talking about fire police is, you know, they asked for these, I think it was 12 positions that they said they needed for fire to be able to get a 3-man engine all the time. But the comment back was, how often do the fire department people go out on calls for automobile accidents and RPD can't respond and they end up having to do some of the work there? You know, that's not even really addressed back in the police portion. It should have been, gosh, if they're not able to get to an accident, they should be able to get to an accident, and they're causing, you know, fire to have to deal with this problem. And, you know, that very well could equate to 12 officers for the police department that we're not even looking at. I just, you know, it just, every time you turn a corner on this thing, there's just lack of information and lack of standardization, lack of, you know, they just weren't thorough. You know, typical consultant, I've dealt with consultants many times throughout my life, and, you know, the one thing that I always remember somebody told me years ago is a consultant's the guy that takes your wristwatch and tells you what time it is. And, you know, unfortunately, they didn't listen very well, and so they didn't do a very good job.
They ain't looking at my watch.
I don't, you know.
looked
My
at
watch
somebody-
got a whole different
It
time
looked
than
at
that.
somebody's watch, and it wasn't anybody in this room probably, so.
All right, well, we've got 9 minutes till they'll be on the line, so everybody kind of take a break for a minute while Bill gets all that set up, and then we'll start. If any of the guests that don't have keys and need to use the restroom or anything, let me know, and we'll get you out to get to one.
And I think it's important that they hear your opinion here loud as a community member, business owner. And here's what I've read, here's what I don't agree with. And I don't think the rest of the community is going to agree with it either. You know, that's it.
I think if they present this at a council meeting, I think they better run to their cars.
This is a very.
I think you're gonna get two sides to that.
What's that?
You're gonna get two sides to that. You're gonna get that group over there, and unfortunately, it's a more vocal group, and they're gonna go, see, I told you we didn't need any more cops. You know, they're dealing with the homeless incorrectly. That's what I'm afraid of.
I'm afraid of that too.
I'd love it if it was the other, group that said, yes, we need more cops on the street, that's the one you want. But unfortunately, I think there's a chance that other group could take this and, I don't know, Jonathan, what do you think about that? I mean, I heard you. Take over my office.
Oh, I don't know what they're gonna do.
The whole Jason thing, I think is just.
Guarantee I'll be there first.
Because that's what the mission that, and I think I'm right on with everything that Heston is saying, dead on.
Hey, Dennis.
They've just been
Hi, Rob.
really
How are you?
I don't
I'm
even
good. How are you?
listen.
Pretty good.
I spoke with them and
That's the day they got their software
they.
last week.
How's your wife?
Personally, I
She want to go up your house another 50?
No, I think she's about ready to pull it.
It's gonna expire. Should we let it expire?
What's that?
It's gonna expire. Should we let it expire?
13th.
She,
It's just very elementary.
she had John something on the masonry out there
I don't know, I think.
Saturday? Friday? Saturday? I think it was Friday.
He probably had those.
Talked to them about
They don't, they have much.
putting
When
rock
she gets
pillars,
3D one
putting
later,
in
and they're in the pregnancy, she will actually see
either
what
a
that
vertical
is.
gate or a sliding gate across the front, because the dogs push that little piece of crap
We
over.
didn't have that.
Oh, clear out to the
Uh-huh.
to the
Couldn't even
street.
tell what ours were.
Trenching and electrical, I want to trench an electrical line out there, because the damn solar things don't work in the winter. I'm putting in a wrought iron gate so the dogs can't push it over. And then this winter first, we're gonna probably do it ourselves. We're gonna put the white fencing along the front that comes up and measures to the pillars. So we have a nice looking front entryway.
Stunned by
She's got all kinds of plans. She's
your
talking about
findings.
doing all these improvement things now.
They don't come
So
first.
We have got all these.
I was okay with it.
concerns.
If it was sold, that would have been fine, but I didn't
Address them
wanna,
that way.
I'm not gonna take
I think
some,
more-
the
more than
lowball
anything,
value, not get anything out of it, and have to come to town and have the same size mortgage.
Well, somebody just asked me
Where,
at
what did you
lunch, and I
base
said,
this
well,
Who really hired
Where,
you?
where?
I really
did
commented about
your-
7.3,
I mean, you
so I
gotta
said,
work
I
from
can't.
someplace. Where
He's
is
like,
that?
well, yeah,
place
because
for
we don't
you
have
guys?
that many people looking in those price ranges. And I said, well,
That's why you're
he
able to
realizes
look at
that.
that.
She said, so to keep lowering it doesn't necessarily mean it's gonna
Right.
bring that buyer
We
because
spent hours
they're not
interviewing
looking for
people,
it.
yet none of
Yep.
the things they shared
I agree.
are
So,
addressed.
So,
What, how is
she
that?
just want, she said, okay, but if we're gonna stay, we're gonna start
And I'm not mad.
taking on
'cause
project at a time. I said, that's fine, that card's
Because
paid
that's
for.
been happening to that.
Trucks running
I'm
fine,
really more
cars running
disappointed
fine,
in just the
so
stuff. It's like,
we'll take them off and, $10,000
so
counts.
for it not to go in our favor, that's not.
So that's what, which is what I think,
No.
Just crap.
she thinks about 8, I think we'll get up to 10 by the time you do the
Sure.
stone masonry on the outside of the pillars
It's a
and,
glazed donut.
I don't know whether, I gotta get signature fencing or gates, is who he recommended, the masonry guy. Whether it'd be better to put in a sliding gate or a lift gate. Yeah,
All the,
because the sliding gates, we can get the gravel in there, then it throws the gate off, and the lift gate might just be, as long as it doesn't move this way. Swing gates, I'm afraid those don't, it's just gonna, it just pushes me. walks his way through it. He's a moron. I need one that he pushes on that goes like this.
Yeah, you get all that time.
That dog's an idiot.
Well, it's not like just having. Just don't stand in the middle.
We all next to you, squat down.
This is not the kind of gate I have that I have to get out of my car every single time. Do it myself. Darn
No,
it.
it doesn't sound like it.
Oh.
I went to a call down off Breslauer, like, I think I was still in Shasta County out there. And to get to this house, you get to the community gate. Well, there's no keypad, there's nothing. And I'm looking at the house and I can see it from where I'm standing. And I thought, it's a hot day. I'm not gonna jump over this fence. And I'm not gonna climb down,
Under it.
go back up. About this time, this car comes up and she goes, oh, you're here for my wife? It's my mom's house. I said, how do you open the gate? She goes, oh, let me show you. She had to climb up on the guardrail, lean out off the bridge and push a button on the back side of the house. I said, that's how you get in and out?
Every single time.
Unless you have, you're a homeowner, you have a remote for it. I'm like,
Yeah, and you're supposed to know that.
I'm looking at the house going,
Is anybody
do I really want to go
dying
there?
inside?
Keep edging on the workman's comp form. How did you get injured?
I was doing my gymnastics trying to get in the gate.
Fell off.
Yeah, which you want to go.
I had one of
Thank you
these,
for handling that.
what's that called, the, like, individual.
Sure.
Yeah.
Why didn't you call Joe Sadowski this morning?
Ian Mateo's house, we were getting ready to go training, and I was looking at his backyard, he's showing me the stuff he's done, and I set my phone just, I was holding like this, and all of a sudden it's on the ground. I'm like, it dropped face down on his rocks, on his river rocks, and I looked up, it was right the whole screen shattered, and I just got the phone. Well, then I peel this thing back, and the other screen was perfect.
That's
Just the Invisible Shield. I didn't do any other.
So it's worth the 20 bucks.
Totally worth it.
It is. I had the same thing and I thought it was broken. I was taking it back.
Pull it back?
Yep.
It works good.
It does. I didn't have one before and it didn't.
Yeah.
The name of the company, they have one of those industrial grade cases for your phone that shows this guy. He's standing up like a, I don't know, little freeway. There's all the snow on the ground. It's probably 75 yards from where he was at down the freeway. He takes it and he throws it as hard as he can. And just like I said, probably 75 to 100 yards by the time it finally got done hitting the bottom. Walked off the snow, man. No scratches, nothing.
Wow. You're the one that covered the whole thing.
$107 for the case.
Yeah.
All right, Bill, are we just about ready? All these guys? I have a reusable water bottle. No. I don't think you want to suck off my water bottle.
Enter your access.
Probably not. You should sleep.
Yeah, here we go. Game faces.
You are the first person to join the meeting. Please stand by.
Okay, I'll mute it until they come on.
I think I should turn this off.